So, Jason, there seems to be a bit of a crisis in education today in many different regards. In terms of re-engagement, what are your thoughts and what have you been thinking about? How might we re-engage students and teachers today?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I look at it as kind of being in three buckets, right? So being intentional, being interconnected, and being impactful. So if we can design learning experiences where those three elements are present, I think we can start to re-engage. I'll kind of break that down. The idea of service is how do we make sure that all learning is relevant to students, but also that they can see how it's relevant to the world around them? And the element of not just helping the individual succeed but also the collective, and how do we move away from solely focused on individualized approach to education to one that's more collective based. And I feel that way because I think that our world, the sort of issues and problems in our world are actually outpacing any one individual to be able to solve. And so I think the power is going to come in engaging collective groups of people looking at problems from multiple perspectives.
Mhm.
So that's one way I think to reengage is to make learning more of a communal act as opposed to an individual one. And I also think an element of surprise is going to be really important. I think that for a lot of our kids in the school day, it's become so monotonous and mundane that they can predict down to the minute of when a water bottle is going to fall off their peer's desk. And I think what we need to do is shake it up a little bit. I think we need to when we can surprise students, and I'm not talking about, some sort of like, you know, trivial surprise, but something that really kind of shakes the way they're thinking about it. Like I'm thinking about the first day of school, right? If you're starting off the first day of school, what if on the first day of school you get a post-it on your door that said, meet me outside by the front doors before you come into class? Right away, all the kids go to the door and they're surprised. That's broken their frame of reference. They're
Right,
like assuming they're going to go in the classroom.
right.
But now they're gathering outside the school. And then you have this sort of meaningful conversation about how do we want to be seen and heard in this classroom? Let's talk about this before we enter the school. Because what we know is for a lot of kids, they check themselves at the door. They don't bring their whole selves into the school because they feel like their whole self isn't accepted. And so if we start off by doing that, all of a sudden we've broken their frame of reference. And all of a sudden now learning becomes more engaging because I'm on my toes.
Mhm.
I think there are some things we need to be consistent with education,
Sure.
creating acceptance and trust. And I think some of those elements need to be consistent. But as far as the school day, I think we need to break it up more so that we're having shared experiences that are surprising, that are helping us to think, I've always got to approach school mindfully.
Hmm.
Because I think now too many kids are approaching school mindlessly. They're
Right.
not even on the lookout. They're just kind of going through the robotic motions because they're so used to this sort of like autopilot of the school day. So as teachers, I think one of the ways we engage our students is to add an element of surprise. And it also brings that joy back to us as teachers. What can we do within our boundaries that we're given to
Hmm.
create surprising situations, to create moments of shared excitement and joy? And how does that be? How could that serve as a trampoline or jumping off point to some sort of deeper learning experience? Yeah. So, and then the second eye of that would be interconnected learning. And I think that sort of goes along with that idea of service, but it's this idea of understanding that, we're both an individual and a collective member of many groups. And I think our schools are really good at focusing on the individual. Unfortunately, we also focus more on the deficiencies than the strengths,
Right.
which is another issue. But I think we need to also expand out to say, how do we harness, our ability to be a unique individual, but also create a sense of belonging, right? Um, how do we, have self-care, but also stewardship? I think those elements of navigating that tension of being both a unique individual, but also a member of a collective is another way to engage students because it helps to frame them to see that their learning has an impact, right? And that sort of segues into that last I of impactful learning. How do we create experiences where students feel like there's authentic audiences and that what they're learning matters? One of the things, one of the reasons why I feel like we have a lack of engagement is because a lot of the students know that, the content is just for a test or for a data point or for a test score, and they don't want to play that game anymore. And unfortunately, we keep perpetuating that. And I think we need to stop because the students are saying to us, we see the world outside of our school walls, and you're not letting us touch it. You're not letting us experience it. You're closing it off from us, and we don't want that. So I think if we can create impactful learning experiences where there are authentic audiences, real world ramifications, problems that are rooted in what the students see in the everyday, and start from there, then learning can take off, as opposed to starting from a content standard that's isolated from the world around them. We want learning that transcends all disciplines and transcends life. And that's how we create impactful moments of learning that I think our students are really yearning for.